can do to become more creative as businesses and as individuals. It's my pleasure to welcome on stage the author, founder of Ideas Island, author and global keynote speaker on business creativity, change, and global business. He's the author of 9 books, including the Idea Book, which was included in the 100 best business books of all time. He's really well known for his talks on creativity, innovation, and idea generation, and really on how to develop a global mindset and build a truly global company. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome on stage with a warm round of applause, Mr. Fredrik Haren.
Thank you very much. So the organizers of this, I must say, really well-organized convention have decided that the last speaker is going to be an author of creativity books. So, of course, that makes me very happy, because I am an author of creativity books. But I'm going to call them out on this. Before I start my speech, I'm going to see how relevant you think this is. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you think that being creative is important in your job? Raise your hand. Very good. Then we are on the same page. I've been studying, this is my inner theme, humanity to the power of ideas. What does this mean? It means I believe in the power of humanity, the potential of humanity and the power of ideas. I've been spent the last 25 years studying creativity all around the world. And I'm so happy that all of you said yes. But it wasn't a big surprise. You see, I've asked this more than 2,000 times in more than 65 countries, and everyone says yes. I knew you were going to say yes. The second question is the more interesting one. How many of you think you are creative? Raise your hand. Welcome to India. In this group, it was more than 80%. It was almost 90%. The global average is 45%, okay? It doesn't matter where you go in the world, everyone will say creativity is important in my job, but most of the time, the majority of people will say it's an important skill, but I do not have it. But India is a different country. I'm from Sweden. In Sweden, it will be 60%. Europe is between 60 and 80%. Professor Diamond from America. What happens if I ask in America? Is it higher or lower? What do you think? Huh? Lower? Okay, I'm going to ask the non-American. What do you think? In America, higher or low? High, of course. Americans are super confident about their own creativity. In America, it's 90%. But I live in Singapore. What do you think about Singapore? Higher or low? Low. Yes. Singapore, 20%. It's the second worst country in the world. But one country is even worse. Which country do you think it is? It's an Asian country. It's obviously not India. It is not Singapore. Which country has the lowest level of creative confidence? Take a guess. Huh? North Korea. There's always a man who says North Korea. It's always a man. Now, he normally sits in the right-hand corner. I don't know why you're sitting here. VIP table. It's a good guess. But did you see how he said it? He said North Korea, and then he laughed a little bit because he thinks he can't answer. Well, sir, 5 years ago, I went to North Korea with one purpose and one purpose only: to be able to answer people like you. And I asked every person I could meet, is creativity important in your job? Every North Korean said yes. Then I asked my second question, do you think you are creative? Every single one of them said yes. The guess North Korea turns out to be absolutely wrong. North Korea is not the country with the lowest level of creative confidence. It is the country with the highest level of creative confidence, even higher than America. When people hear this, they say, oh, no, it can't be true. They didn't understand English. I had a translator. They have to say that or they will be shot. Fair enough. But if you study North Korean culture, they have something called the Juji idea. And according to a Juji idea, this is something they truly believe. What makes humans different from animals is that humans are creative and animals are not. They actually believe they are creative. Of course, you're right. North Korea is one of the least creative countries on earth, but the creative confidence is sky high. The country with the lowest level of creative confidence, it is South Korea. One of the most creative countries on earth, ranked in the top 5. Last time I was in South Korea, 300 people in the audience. Is creativity important in your job? Nee, 300 Koreans said yes. Second question, do you think you are creative? 0. I said, come on, someone, anyone? One man raised his hand and said no. He just wanted to make a clarification. He said no, not compared to Leonardo da Vinci. That's the South Korean way. That's the Japanese way. That is the Singaporean way. Those are the 3 countries at the bottom. Do you think you are creative? No, not compared to the most creative person who has ever lived. What's the American way of thinking? Are you creative? Oh yeah, compared to my brother. I'm not sad to say, but India scores as one of the top 5 most confident countries in the world. Yes, it is good, but it is also bad. You see, creativity is like this, very simplified. To be creative, you have to be confident. Everyone is walking in this direction and you're going to say, screw those people, I'm going to walk in this direction. So you have to be confident. On the other hand, truly creative people, they think like this. Everyone is walking in this direction, I am not going to do this, I'm going to walk in this direction. Maybe not, maybe I should walk in this direction, maybe not, maybe I should walk in this direction. You see, creative people are always doubting there might be a better way. And you know what I find so interesting during this day? That you have been talking about 2 things today. I mean, a lot of things, but 2 things kept coming up. One was how India has such a big confidence, how confident you are. How you go out in the rest of the world and you say, why are you even here? Those kind of comments. And at the same time, you've been talking about how you doubt yourself all the time. I think this is perfect. It's this duality of confidently doubting that makes a truly creative person. Doubtfully confident. I actually believe that India is very well positioned to become one of the most creative countries on earth. And I'm going to here to talk about it, but I'm not here to talk about India. I'm the non-English speaker. I'm here to give an outlook from a global perspective. I'm here to talk about creativity from a global scale and what you can learn from the rest of the world. But I'm going to do one more question. Do you think your company is doing enough to develop the creativity of its employees? Yes. Raise your hand. Do you think your company is doing enough to develop the creativity of its employees? Yeah, that was you. That was basically you. If you ask this question, 2 people say yes. HR manager, normally. And person sitting next to HR manager. So let's see, are you an HR manager? Yeah, okay, that's good. Oh, you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. Oh, okay. Most people, basically no one says yes. Everyone says creativity is important. Most people say it's important skill, but I don't have it. And no one says we're doing enough to develop the creativity that we so desperately need. So I am on a mission right now. I'm going around the world. I've been to 67 countries, and every time I come to a country, I'm trying to study what is creativity in this country. It's becoming a new book. It's called The World of Creativity. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about what we can learn about the different facets of human creativity, not from India. I love the panel that we had earlier about what Made in India Manager, but this is going about what can we learn from the rest of the world about creativity. So I'm going to London next week. What can we learn about creativity from the UK? What can we learn about creativity from Oman? What can we learn about creativity from South Africa? And that's what I'm here to share with you. Not all of it, but some of it. But we need to talk first about what creativity is. What is the definition of an idea? My favorite definition goes like this. An idea is that one person takes two formerly known things and combines them in a new way. One person takes two formerly known things and combines them in a new way. You see, the reason I like the definition so much is because it shows that there are no new ideas. There are no brand new ideas. Every idea is a combination of something that already existed. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm going to give you an example. This is one guy in Lithuania. He took the concept of a sink, which is a previously known thing, and he took the concept of a urinal, which is a previously known thing. Now you take a sink and a urinal, you combine the two, what do you get? Any creative people in the room? Sink, urinal combined, what do we get? 90% of you said you're creative. This is where you prove it. Okay, sink and urinal combined, what do we get? Good. I was in America recently, a guy said, what, shower? You get this. Now, not everyone understands, so here's an explanation. By the way, the timer is not working. If you can fix it, it would be great. First you pee, then you wash your hands. Water used to flush your pee, water used to wash your hand is now used to flush your pee away. Let's see. How many of you think this is a good idea? Raise your hands. Yeah, about 80%. Why is it a good idea? Anyone? It has to make the world better. How does it make the world better? Yes. And I'm pretty sure you have a water problem. I know it. You have a water problem in India. Everywhere. Most everywhere. So this would save water. But this not only saves water. Is it good for a second reason? Time. It saves time. Because now we don't have to walk over to the sink. Sorry, I just reminded. I did a speech in Malaysia recently, and a woman said, it saves time. I said, very good. But then she said a different answer. She said, now they can do two things at once. She had no clue how we pee. Anyway, it saves time because we don't have to walk over to the sink. Is it good for a third reason? Space. So now we're saving the environment, we are saving money, and we are being more hygienic. It improved on the urinal in 3 totally different ways. Actually, it is better than that. It's 5 or 6 different ways it improves on the urinal. Now, this is why I love this example so much, because the urinal is 2,000 years old. The sink is 2,000 years old. So you take two things that are 2,000 years old, and one person in Lithuania could rearrange them in a bit and create something new. So you see, that's the definition of an idea. And the definition of an idea is that a person takes knowledge and information and combines it in a new way. A person takes knowledge and information and combines it in a new way. That's all we have to do. The important part is the plus. Now, this is a prestigious conference, and we had, as an opening speaker, a professor on negotiation to teach about negotiation with good examples. And then we have successful entrepreneurs and politicians. And now we're going to have an author of creativity books. But you might have noticed that the idea I showed you wasn't mine. I took it from the internet. And I'm pretty sure there's one or two people in the room now thinking, why is he not showing his own idea? If we're going to listen to this man, he should show some example of his own creativity, yes or no? This is India. You want proof. So I'm going to give you one more example. I'm going to show how one person took two previously known things and combined them in a new way. And this time, it's going to be me. Are you ready for that? Yes. Are you ready to be blown away by my creative genius? Yeah. Can I just say that when I do this in America, you know what happens? Are you ready to be blown away by my creative genius? What do Americans do? Yeah, awesome! You come to Asia. Are you ready to be blown away by my creative genius? Yeah, sure. Asia, definition of a tough crowd. I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. You see, I took two previously known things, I combined them in a new way, and I did it on the book that you heard about, the idea book, the one that was included in the 100 best business books of all time. Because I said, if I'm going to write a book about creativity, it's not only going to be about creativity, it is going to be creative in itself. Are you ready? Here we go. I took the concept of a book. I did not invent a book. I took the concept of a notebook. I did not invent a notebook. Now you take a book and a notebook, you combine the two, what do you get? You get a book and a notebook. So here's my book. It's 50% book. Here you can read, how can I become more creative? It's 50% notebook. Here you can write down all the brilliant ideas you get when you read my book. It's not a book, it's not a notebook, it's a book and a notebook. All right. Let's be honest, that was about 15 seconds too late, okay? I tell you, India, this is actually one of my points in my speech, that India is such a mix of everything on earth. I do this in America. I took a book, I took a notebook, I combined the two. I did a book in a notebook. America, oh, that's awesome! You go to China, I took a book, I took a notebook, I combined the two. I did a book in a notebook. Huh? You come to India. I took a book, I took a notebook, I combined the two, I did a book in a notebook. Huh? Oh, sorry. You're like a well-behaved, rude Chinese. That's what you're like. But I'm sorry, you caught yourself a little bit too late. So I asked you about the urinal. About 90% of you thought it was a good idea. I'm going to ask you again, and I don't want your pity, okay? I want you to be honest. How many of you think that this was a brilliant idea? Raise your hand. Oh, bullshit. 25% trying to be nice to me. But still, even though 75% of you think this is a bad idea, or at least this was not a good idea. And now I have a problem, because I still have a lot of time left. And you have lost all respect for the speaker. You're like, that's it? They fly in a white man and that's it? That's his idea, some stupid white pages into a book? So here's lesson number one. Just because a group of people don't recognize creative genius when it's being presented to them, doesn't mean the idea is bad. It only means the group is not good at seeing creative genius. Nokia was here earlier. When Nokia saw the iPhone, you know what they did? They laughed. Who wants a mobile phone that lasts for just one day? It's a niche product. That was the exact word of the Nokia CEO. It's never going to be nothing but a niche product. You see, you can be very successful and still miss creative genius. Because you just did. You see, this idea is much better than most people realize. I'm not going to say it's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to say it's much better than you thought. So I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. Is there anyone here who can figure out why is this idea much better than the rest of the group realized? The one of you who raised your hand, this is where you prove that you meant it. Why is this a good idea? Yes? Yeah? Sorry? Oh, I am in the top, but I am not there because of this. I'm just there because the book itself is good, okay? Not because of this. Why was this a good idea?
Implementation. You get to register ideas that come to you.
Oh, yes, so good. So this is what people usually think. They think from the perspective of the user. So they say, oh, this is good. So all other creativity books are just monologue. Oops. Oh, sorry. Where are we? There we go. All other books are just monologues. It's just the author speaking to you all the time. You never get to say anything. My book becomes dialogue. You see, I speak for a while, and then you speak. I speak, you speak. Dialogues are much more fun than monologues. So this is a good answer, and that is absolutely true. It makes the book better. And now you're thinking you should buy the book, and I'm sorry, it's not available in India. But I can tell you this, if you want the book, I'll happily give it to you for free. Give you a business card of the book, and I will send it to you personally. I want you to have, I'm not trying to sell the book, I'm trying to give you the book, okay? But you're missing the point. It is not, you shouldn't think from the perspective of the user. You should think of the perspective of me as the author, or more importantly, as me as the publisher. You see, I self-publish my books. Why is this a good idea for me as a publisher? Faster printing? Sorry? No. Okay, I'm going to give you a hint. How many copies does the average business book sell? How many copies does the average business book sell? Do you know? In the world. Yeah, 20,000 is a good guess. Actually, even lower. It's about 3,000 copies. Yeah, I know. It's desperately low. The average novel sells 400 copies. Why is it so low? Because there are hundreds and thousands of business books out there, but companies buy not that many. How many books do you buy for your employees in a year? How many? How many do you give to your managers in a year? Shout out. How many books do you give away? On average? The average is 1. The average company gives away 1 book per manager per year. There are hundreds and thousands of business books out there. The budget is very low. It means it's almost impossible to get a bestseller. And the only way you get the bestseller is if the company buys in bulk. But my book is not a book. My book is a notebook. Notebooks are not bought on the budget for management books. Notebooks are bought on the budget for... And how big is the budget for stationery? Ka-ching! The average business book sells 3,000 copies. I have, self-published, in Singapore alone, sold 15,000 copies. I have in Sweden alone sold, wait, hold it. I have in Sweden alone sold 150,000 copies self-published. I have in Iceland alone, Iceland, sold 3,000 copies. Iceland, how many people live in Iceland? 300,000 people. That means 1% of a country's population has bought this book. It's better than Harry Potter. I've sold 250,000 copies in 17 languages around the world, self-published. I'm not showing you this to say that I'm a creative genius. I am not, I don't think I am, but I've sold thousands and thousands more than I would have if I didn't put some stupid white pages into the book. This is what creativity is. It's not going to the moon, it's not Leonardo da Vinci, it's doing what everyone else does in a slightly different manner to huge result. Now I'm going to talk about why. Why is it so important that we are creative right now? I call this idea perception. Idea perception is your ability to see how the world is changing. Because I've been doing it for 25 years, but it's never been more fun than now. Because the world is changing so utterly fast right now. Things that used to be totally impossible is becoming possible. I like to show this picture. Look at this. I'm 50 years old. 50 years ago, this was science fiction, literally science fiction. Imagine a telephone in your watch with no cable attached. Star Trek technology, Dick Tracy technology. 50 years later, we have it. I was in China recently. A guy said, "Why so big?" This is my favorite. 50 years ago. In the future, we will not clean our homes. In the future, robots will clean our homes. 50 years later, we do. I was in Sweden recently. I did a speech. A guy said, "Which one is the robot?" I'm very happy you're laughing, especially, but please don't applaud. You see, this was in Sweden. No one was laughing. We are the most gender-sensitive country on earth. Everyone just looked at the guy. what the hell did you just say? That was sexist joke. The guy said, no. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm Swedish. I'm a robot expert. He said 10 years ago, this was a cool robot. But today, if you go to a robot exhibition and you show this, no one's going to care. Because in 10 years, we went from robots looking like this to robots looking like that. And that is very much up to, thank you, China and India. How many robot scientists did the world have 20 years ago? How many do we have today? Because of countries like India and China, we now have much more robot scientists. And with much more robot scientists, much more robot innovation, which means faster change. And I don't care what industry we talk about. So what we need is the ability to see, understand, embrace, and act on change. That is idea perception. So now we're going to see if you have that. I'm going to ask you about a change. A change should happen in my industry, the book industry. What is the big change that happened in my industry in the last 5 to 10 years? Totally transformed our industry. We went from books to what? Anyone? Books to? Yes. Okay, good branding of Amazon in India. Mostly people say ebook. But you said Kindle. It's the same answer. Kindle is just a branded version of ebook. 90% of you said this. The big change that happened in the book industry, we went from books to ebooks, books to Kindle. Unfortunately, the answer is wrong. And this time, I wasn't even asking you for changes that will happen in the future. I asked you for a change that has already happened, and yet you got it wrong. That's because we're so bad at seeing change. Let's try one more time. When did people read books? Like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. When did people read books? In which situations? Yes, while traveling. Evening before sleeping. Toilet, correct. And on vacation. People would read when they're traveling, on the toilet, 15 minutes before going to sleep, and on vacation. When do people read books now? On vacation. What do people do on the bus, on the subway, on the airplane, 15 minutes before going to sleep and on vacation? What do people do? See? The answer is not we went from books to ebooks. The answer is we went from book to Facebook. Look at this. These are pictures I've been taking in airports where everyone used to read 10 years ago. Now look, the next time you fly, look how many are reading. Look at this. This is in Philippines. 4 people. Okay, I know he's reading a book, but why is he reading a book? Yes, out of battery. That is correct. But this is not an ebook, this is not an ebook, and this is not an ebook. They are not reading ebooks. They are checking emails and playing games. Look at this. One family in Kuala Lumpur. They rather share one computer than, God forbid, read on paper. But the next one is the best one. The next one is the perfect picture. Some people think the next one is fake because it's so good, but it's an actual human being. I took the picture myself. I don't know the woman, but it is absolutely perfect. And if you believe in books, you're going to cry. Are you ready? Look at this. Changi Airport, 5 years ago. This is a woman pretending to read a book. But she's actually watching YouTube. And just like that, the book died. Book sales are down 43%. And this was even a change. I wasn't even asking you to look into the future. I was asking you to say something that has already happened, and yet most people miss it. The big change is not we went from books to ebooks. The big change is we went from buying books to not buying so many books anymore. That is the sad fact. What we have to think about is what is the ununderstood change that is happening in our industry right now. Not the one everyone talks about, not artificial intelligence or Bitcoin or whatever. What is it the thing we should have talked about in the book industry? What is our ununderstood change? You see, here's the problem. We might never have lived in faster times of change, but most companies are quite bad, or most people are quite bad at really understanding and embracing and changing. Which industries do you think I do the most work for right now? Like, which industries are terrified of disruption? Every industry is terrified, but which are the ones that are most terrified? Sorry? Banks? Banks is a good answer. Media is a good... No, media was like 10 years ago. Banks, the other one is? Huh? Healthcare is coming. Last year, suddenly I started getting a lot of bookings from healthcare. It's just started, and I think they're absolutely right. It's going to be the next big one. But right now, last year, it was banks and cars. Banks and cars. But I want to tell you this story. About 6 months ago, I was invited to speak for chicken farmers. A company that breeds chickens. About the disruption in the chicken industry. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to talk about disruption in the chicken industry, I should show them this. Have you seen this? Impossible Meat. It's a hamburger made out of 100% plant-based hamburger. This is not meat, this is plant. It has the texture, the fat, it drips, the fat drips, it looks, has the texture, it's the color, everything reminds you of meat, except it's not, it's plant. Why would anyone buy a chicken if we can now start to create something that human beings think is meat, but it's not? So I had this picture in my slide deck. The night before the presentation, we're clicking through the slides. I show them this picture, and they stop me. I say, Fredrik, stop. You cannot show this picture. I say, what do you mean? No. We want you to speak about disruption, but not this much disruption. They had me take it out. We don't want to hear about the change. The good news with this is, most people are not as good at seeing change as we would like them to be. So we just have to be a little bit better than them. We need to become a little bit better at understanding and using our creativity. Which brings us to the topic of the book, the world of creativity. It's based on this premise that when we talk about, for example, America, and we talk about American creativity, everyone knows what we're thinking about, right? What is American creativity? Oh, it's Silicon Valley. It's go to the moon. It's shoot for the stars. Elon Musk is not an American. He's from South Africa. He grew up in Canada, but then he moved to America, because if you want to go to Mars, America is the place to be. And this is his new rocket, and there's an American flag on it. This is American creativity. Moonshot ideas. And everyone, Singapore says we want to be the Silicon Valley of Asia. Japanese creativity is the total opposite. When we say Japanese creativity, what do you think about? What are they famous for when it comes to creativity? Yes, Kaizen, small improvements all the time. Lexus, perfect example. Japanese car, they did not invent a car, they don't do crazy cars, but they do really good cars in pursuit of perfection. It could be the slogan of Japan. Now here we have America, go to the moon. Here we have Japan, small improvements all the time. Almost opposite approaches to creativity. And of course, these are simplifications. But we know that let's do it the Japanese way, let's do it the American way. But there are 200 countries on earth. We only know really about 2. What about Indonesian creativity? What about Sri Lankan creativity? What about Brazilian creativity? What can we? There's so many facets of human cultures around the world that all have different approaches to quality, to happiness. and to creativity. So what can we learn about creativity from Iceland, for example? So I went to Iceland to find out. Iceland is famous for Vikings. The cool thing with the Icelandic people, the cool thing with Iceland is that the language is the same as 1,000 years ago. They never changed the language. If you go back and read a book from 1,000 years ago in English, you will not understand a thing. If you go back and read a book in Icelandic, it's almost exactly the same. And in Iceland, they have a word called heimskur. This is a Viking word. What does heimskur mean? It means that 1,000 years ago, when you were a Viking and you had a farm, you cut down some trees, you built a boat, you rented some men, and then you went down to Europe. And what did you do that? What was the purpose of a Viking trip? What did they do? Huh? There you go. Raid, steal. Steal gold, steal silver, steal weapons, steal cows, steal anything you can. But more importantly, steal ideas. How do they make weapons in Istanbul? How do they farm in Norway? Take those ideas, go back to your farm and implement those ideas. Look what other people are doing in other places and bring them back to your farm. If you didn't do that, you were a heimskur. Heimskur means moron, idiot. Which brings us to the car industry. The car industry is a perfect example of an industry that has been very good at looking at what other people are doing in the car industry. I'm not trying to offend anyone if you're in the car industry, but if you meet anyone in the car industry, and I work a lot with them, and say, "Hi, where do you work?" "I work in BMW." "Where did you work before?" "Oh, Audi." It's like it's industrial incest. That's what it is. They just walk between different car companies. You hardly ever meet anyone who comes from a different industry. So I recently did a speech for the leadership of Volvo, the Chinese car company, or Swedish car company. And I said, it's now been rumored that Apple is doing a car. You know how everyone did mobile phones until Apple came in and said, the mobile phone is not a phone with a computer, it's a computer with a phone. What if Apple comes in and actually is doing a car? And they say, a car is not 4 wheels with a computer, it's a computer with 4 wheels. Now suddenly cars will be doing what? Pushing them. What do you think they said? Well, this is true, but it sounds unbelievable, but it's true. What is the first idea they came up with? If Apple does a car, what will the iCar do? What is the first idea they came up with? They said if Apple makes a car, every car has a different charger. The first idea made the cars worse. The second idea they came up with, if Apple makes a car, it will hang every day. They couldn't think of a good idea. If I ask people who are not in the car industry, what do you think the iCar can do? They come up with the most amazing ideas. For example, what? Give me some ideas. What do you think the Apple car can do? Okay, self-drive. Yes, of course. Suddenly there will be Bluetooth to the other 5 cars around you. It's like, are you turning or what? We could talk to the people around you. Actually, 100 years ago, you could talk to the other people around you. Then we lost that ability. My favorite if Apple makes a car, you can choose the sound of the car. You can choose the color of a car, but why can't you choose the sound? There's not a single car out there where you can choose from like 500 different pre-programmed honking signals. Why not? Because the car industry is struggling to even try to understand the disruption that is already hitting them. What is the big disruption in the car industry right now? What's the big thing hitting them? It's like 4 hits at the same time. Boom, 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 boom. What's the first one? Self-driving. What's the second one? Electric. What's the third one? Yes, Uber or Ola, car sharing. And what's the fourth one? digitalization, computerization, from mechanics to computers, from product to service, from petrol to electric, from owning to sharing. And they are just struggling to keep up. I did a speech for Bentley, and they will have an electric Bentley out in a couple of years. When suddenly the consumer said, I want an electric car. But what is the next big trend in personal transportation? If they should look further? This is called outlook. If we would look further, what is the next thing that's going to hit them? Huh? What's the big innovation that we've all been waiting for in the car industry for the longest time? There you go. Flying cars. This is a test they're doing in Dubai. It's not functional. There's no human inside, but it is a human-sized drone, an automatic, full-sized, human, self-driving, autonomous human drone being tested in Dubai and in Singapore later this year. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you think that we will have full-size human, autonomous, self-driving, Uber-like drones in traffic in at least one city on Earth before we die? Raise your hand. Yeah. 90%. I've been asking this question for a few years. 10 years ago, it was less than 5%. Everyone said, that's just science fiction. It's never going to happen. In 10 years, as a species, we just said, where is my flying car? And not a single car company has shown a credible prototype of a personal drone. I did a speech recently in Singapore. The Minister of Transportation, a politician, the ones who usually adopt two ideas last. The politician stood up and said in Singapore, we will have autonomous self-driving human-sized drones in Singapore before we die. And a guy in the audience said, you mean that is how we will die? This drone is actually made in Munich, but not by BMW and not by Mercedes and not by Audi, by a startup. Don't be a heimsker. Go outside your own industry. Look what people are doing otherwise. Get smarter. Second one, what can we learn about creativity from China? So Japan, Kaizen, that makes sense. America, that makes sense. But China? Can we really learn anything about creativity from China? What would you say? If we say creativity in China, what are you thinking right now? What are they famous for? Copy. I actually moved to China in 2005 because I was going to teach Chinese people to be creative because they don't know creativity. All they do is copy. But I lived there for a few years. I realized it's not that they're not creative in China. They have a different kind of creativity, and we can learn from them. Now, it's not like they're not copying. My God, do they copy in China? You can buy a fake egg in China. You can buy a fake Mercedes-Benz in China. And this is my favorite. A fake town. The Chinese people, this is outside Shanghai. A Chinese mayor went around Europe, looked at cute cities. I went to Austria, went to Switzerland, went to Sweden, went to England, saw really cute cities, picked the best one called Sigtuna, went back to China and built an exact replica. It looks exactly like this. I've been to Sigtuna. This looks like Sigtuna. Every house looks like it would be. Every tree is where the tree would be in Sweden. There's even a church, which is kind of ironic since they're not Christians in China. But they don't care. They copied it all out. How can we learn anything from a country that only knows how to copy? But then I met this woman. in Chinese woman, Amelia Hendra, 30-year-old, the new generation of Chinese, super creative young lady, a designer, works for IDEO. And she said, Fredrik, you Westerners, you Angmos, all you do is talk about creativity. That's all you talk about. Intellectual property, patents, copyright. She said, Fredrik, listen to me. It is not about copyright. I said, no, it's about copying right. And first I laughed, but then I said, wait a minute. What is the definition of an idea? Do you remember how I started this speech? You take two things and you combine them in a new way. What does that mean? It means it's impossible to create anything without copying something. Every creative person copies from someone. Apple did not invent the mobile phone. Apple did not invent the smartphone. Apple did not invent the MP3 player. They did not invent the computer. They did not invent the graphical interface. They stole it from Xerox. Apple are masters at copying right. When I lived in China in 2007, there was a conference. There was 1,000 Chinese in the audience. Teaching, the name of the conference, How Can China Become Innovative Country? 1,000 Chinese in the audience, 4 white people on stage. White people teaching innovation to Chinese people who don't know how to do it. Those 4 people were, number 1, the head of Ericsson in China. You can see this is a few years ago. The head of Ericsson in China from Sweden. Second person, the head of Nokia in China from Finland. Third person, the head of Motorola in China from America. Fourth person, me. The moderator asked this question. How can China become an innovative country? The guy from Ericsson said, if China wants to be an innovative country, you need to stop copying. And the Chinese wrote it down word by word. Second guy from Nokia. He said, if China wants to be an innovative country, you need to stop copying. Motorola. If China wants to be an innovative country, you need to stop copying. Me. I looked at the audience and I said, if China wants to be an innovative country, you need to stop copying. No, of course I didn't say that. That would be a very boring story. Instead, I looked at the 3 of them and I said, which one of you invented the mobile phone? Because the other one must have copied. Which of these 3 invented the mobile phone? Nokia, Ericsson, or Motorola? Which 3? Which of these 3? Motorola. Okay, let's try again. I'm from Sweden. Motorola, Ericsson, or Nokia? Which one? No, Motorola. Motorola invented the first mobile phone. Okay, fine. It was an advanced walkie-talkie. But Ericsson made it a smart system. Nokia made it a mass market. Apple made it a smartphone. But everyone copies. Pablo Picasso said, good artists copy, great artists steal. Albert Einstein said, creativity is your ability to hide your sources. Now ask yourself this question, who is better positioned to be creative? Someone who goes around, all around Europe, and looks at all the cutest cities they can find, and then steals one, but then comes to the realization, oh, I'm not supposed to steal one. I'm supposed to go and look at all the different cute cities I can see, and then pick the best one. Or someone who doesn't even go and look. When they built Changi Airport, the best airport in the world, for 25 years in a row, they went to Charles de Gaulle, they went to JFK, they went to Heathrow, and they went to Schiphol. The best airports in the world when they were building Changi Airport. Then they took the best of every airport that they saw, and they built Changi Airport. I recently worked with Changi Airport, and I asked them, when is the last time someone came from JFK, Schiphol, or Heathrow and visited you? They couldn't even remember. Have you been to Schiphol or Heathrow or JFK recently? The airports suck, but they still think they are the best in the world. We need to learn how to copy right. Last one. Mongolia. Now, what can we learn about creativity from the Mongolians? Most people would say nothing. What's there? So I went there. In Mongolia, we have the nomads. What does nomad mean? Anyone? Sorry? A wanderer, yes? Or someone who doesn't have a home. Yeah? Those are the two most common definitions. A nomad means someone who's always wandering or someone who doesn't have a home. That is the definition of the word, and that is absolutely correct. But what is the etymology of the word? What is the actual meaning of the word nomad? No one knows. I didn't know either. But when I found out, I got goosebumps. You see, nomadic doesn't mean that we don't have a home. And it doesn't mean that we're always wandering. It means literally in search for greener pastures. A nomad has a home. It's right there. A nomad will say to himself, where's the best place on earth to live? And I'm going to live right there. And I'm going to live there as long as it is the best place on earth to live. But when it's not the best place on earth to live anymore, I'm going to move. I'm going to uproot my tent, I'm going to take my castle, and I'm going to move somewhere else where it's even better to live. One of the nomads I met said, Westerners, you think nomadic means a movement of the body. It means a movement of the mind. The best example of a nomadic company, if you ask me, is Amazon. Jeff Bezos looked at how we were selling books and he said, we're selling books in bookstores. Why? Why don't we sell it online? So he started selling books online, and then he said, wait, why are we selling books online? Why don't we sell everything online? So he started selling everything online. Then just when we started making money on that, they said, you know what? We have all these servers. Why don't we rent these servers out? And Amazon Web Services is now one of the most profitable parts of Amazon. Then they bought a grocery store. And then they started to create content on Amazon Prime to compete with Netflix. And then they released Alexa to compete with Google on how people search for information. Every time that Amazon is just starting to make money, Jeff Bezos says, you know what? There's even greener pastures somewhere else. That is the nomadic mindset of changing our minds. So I'm going to tell you a story about what happens when you don't have this. So this happened to my brother. He comes up to one of these machines. This is for the Swedish airline, SIS. I'm sure this has happened to you because it has also happened to me. He goes up to the machine and the machine says, enter your booking code. Yes? Ever happened to you? Yes. You go in, he gets an error message. It says wrong code, please try again. Ever happened to you? Yes. He tries it, it doesn't work. He tries it, it doesn't work. Third time, it says wrong code, please contact service staff. There's a woman standing there. He walks up to her and says, excuse me, miss, there's something wrong with the machine. There's something wrong with my code. The woman, without looking at the piece of paper, without looking at the code, the woman says, do you have a 1 or a 0 in your code? The woman goes, my brother goes, yes, I have a 1. She goes, try changing that to the lowercase letter L. He goes, of course. He goes to the machine, he tries. It works. His first reaction is, why didn't I think of this? His second reaction is, wait a minute, how did she know this? She didn't look at my code, how did she know this? She goes back to her and says, excuse me, you didn't look at my code. Let me guess, this happens a lot. She goes, oh yes, happens all the time. He goes, then why don't you call your IT department? They're uppercase and lowercase, numbers and letters. There are 9 of them. It's 32 billion combinations. If you take away all the L's and all the O's, all the ones and all the zeros, it's down to 25 billion combinations. It will last for 5,000 years. And no one will ever have this problem again. The woman smiles and says, no, it's okay. I love to help people. What is the problem here? The problem is that she did not have a nomadic mindset. She didn't move her mind. Her job used to be to help people check in. Now they introduce a new technology and a new machine, and she still thinks that her job is to help people check in. Her new job is to make sure people have no problem checking in to begin with. Ask yourself this question. What is the mindset that we need to change in our company? That's something that used to be right, but is not right anymore. Because you see, change doesn't happen because someone invents something. Change doesn't even happen because someone buys something that someone invented. Change happens when someone buys something and implements it, and we start to do things differently than we did before. That's when true change happens. So there were 3 countries that we can learn from. How about India? What is Indian creativity? I don't know yet, and that is one of the reasons I am here. I would love, if you have any ideas, you come and talk to me. But I have some ideas, I'm trying to pin it down. But I know one thing. I know that India has something. This is not the one I'm going to put in the book, but India has something. It's that ability to understand that there's not one way of doing something. I like the banyan tree. To me, this is a symbol of India. Almost all other cultures believe that they look at themselves as a traditional tree. I have my roots, and this is where I come from, and then we have a trunk, and this is who I am, and then I reach out into the world with my branches, and that is how I connect with other people. India is different. Because India isn't one culture. India is all the cultures. All the religions, all the languages, all the cultures, everything mixed up. You don't know what is the root and what is the tree. You don't know, just like a banyan tree, if it's a root or a branch, and the banyan tree doesn't care. If there's anyone who is best positioned to pick up the best ideas from everywhere else in the world, it should be the Indians. And I think it is the Indians. Because you're already picking up all the different ways to do something within India. There's no one Indian way. But I want to end with something else. Because there has been a few people in this conference who's been talking, even the minister himself, who has been talking about why India should become a developed country. So I'm going to end by saying, I hope you never become one. I hope you never become a developed country. Because, you see, it's not something to strive for. I left the developed world 15 years ago and moved from the developed world to the developing world because I felt this is where you want to be. For the last 15 years, I've spent half of my time in developing countries and half of my time in developed countries. And you do not want to become a developed country. And I'm going to tell you why. What does the word developed country mean? What is the literal meaning? What does developed mean? Huh? It means done. My country is developed, my country is done. It's like saying, I built a house. I finished a race. Who wants to be done? And I'm not saying that the developed world stopped innovating, but I am saying the developed world mentally slowed down. There's a huge difference to define yourself from building a house than having built a house. There's a huge energy in running a marathon compared to finished a marathon. And it is a stupid, stupid idea to believe that you are a developed country. Norway is arguably the most developed country on earth. It's the richest country, it's the healthiest country, it's the well-educated country, and it's a very peaceful country. If Norway was a person, everyone would like to be Norway. But if you go to Norway, and which I have done, and you ask Norwegians, do you think Norway will be better tomorrow than it is today? 90% of them says no. Because they don't think Norway can become much better than it is today. Which of course is absolute crap. If you look at any country in any time in history, they might have thought that they had reached the pinnacle of human innovation. And then 100 years later, we look back at them and we laugh. And we will laugh at how Norway looks today, 100 years from now, but they don't see it. And that's why they don't go and look at what's happening in developing countries. We talk about copies from India and China, like the Chinese Google and the Chinese Twitter. When the Chinese Google and the Chinese Twitter are way more advanced than Google and Twitter. You can do things in the internet in China that you can only dream about doing in America or have nightmares about in America. A developing country knows that they are not done and therefore keeps looking for better ways of doing it. And that doesn't mean you should look at how can we become like them. You should aim way higher than wherever we happen to be right now. And that is what you're doing. But the biggest advantage that you have is that when you live in a developing country, you keep looking. When I go to the developed world and I ask, do a conference like this in America or a conference like this in China, in Germany or in Sweden, in the developed world, and I say, you need to learn from the rest of the world. You need to understand what happens in the rest. You need to pick up the best ideas all over the world and implement them in your companies. They look at me and say, yeah, we do that, but they don't. They have no clue what happens here. If I go to America, if I go to Germany and I ask 1,000 people, which I have done, hundreds of thousands of people, say the name of the leaders of China. Say the name of the leader of India. Take a guess. How many percent can do that? Of 1,000 people in America or Germany, how many can do this? It's a low number, but how low is it? 5, 10%? 2%? It is 0.1%. And that person is an immigrant. They have no clue of what happens in this part. Zero, no clue. I was in America recently. I was saying, you know Mao and you know Gandhi. How can you know things about India and China 30 years ago when those countries didn't matter? But now, when they are superpowers, this is where the growth is happening for your companies, when they're innovating, how can you know less about them now than you did 30 years? How can you get the internet and become ignorant? How is this possible? A woman got so upset, she stood up and she interrupted me and she said, that's a very unfair statement. I said, really? Yes. You see, okay, why? Why don't you know the names of the leaders of India and China? And she said, it's because the names are so long and difficult to pronounce. Okay, what's the name of the leader? What's the leader of India? Modi, not very hard. What's the leader of China? Xi, 2 letters. It's not because the names are long and difficult, it's because they're utterly ignorant of what happens in this part of the world. If I go to the West and I say the names of 10 people from developing countries that will change the world in the next decade, scientists, entrepreneurs, pop stars, business leaders, anything, just say the name of 10 people. Do you know what the most common answer is? Gandhi. Do you know what the second most common answer is? Nelson Mandela. I said they have to be alive. They cannot do it. I swear to God, they cannot say the name of 10 people from developing countries that will contribute anything to human development in the next decade because they are utterly, utterly ignorant. Now, who do you think is better positioned to be a creative person if creativity is to take 2 things and combine them? Someone who has only one eye and only knows what happens in the West, or someone who knows what happens in the West and also what happens in the East? If you only know Italian food, you can only do Italian food. If you only know Indian food, you can only do Indian food. But if you know Italian food and Indian food, you can combine the two and you can make a tandoori pizza. And that is the advantage of India. But of course, my last segment was a metaphor. I don't talk about countries. I don't care about countries. This is just metaphors for us to think in. I totally agree with Professor that we are not our countries. We are not our identities. This is not about countries. This is about your companies. The question I want you to leave you with is not if India is a developed country or not. I want you to ask you this question. Are you running a developing company or are you running a developed company? Nokia used to be a developing company. Sony used to be a developing company. But then they got stuck and they thought they knew it. And they stopped looking what other people were doing. And they only looked what happened in their industry. And they lost it. But more than anything else, what I'm going to leave you with is a personal question to yourself. Are you a developing person? Or are you a developed person? Are you constantly looking at new ways of learning things from all over the world, regardless where it comes from? May it be an Indonesian idea or may it be a Brazilian idea? Because the biggest difference that has happened in the world in the last 10 years is that innovation is now happening anywhere. Mobile payments in China, mobile advertising in Indonesia, new ways of growing things in Brazil. Innovation is happening anywhere. The people and the companies who has the ability to look out and pick up those ideas quickly and implement them will be the winners. And I think Indians are very well positioned to be those people. Good luck with that and thank you very much.